Hi there, I want to talk about a few things I'm thinking about. So last week in my Quality in the Time of Coronavirus, I talked about us engaging in dialogue and having meaningful conversations. And we are certainly seeing many of these meaningful conversations in this corner. So I'd like to hear from viewers whose lives have been impacted by Pirsig's work. I invite you to tell me your story. And when you share your story about your relationship with Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, or Lila, or any other of Pirsig's work, let me know if you'd be open to engaging with me in dialogue about this on my channel. Of course, time is a constraint, but I would like to get a sense of how people have been influenced by Pirsig. Also, I'm exploring the concept of sense-making and quality as an antidote to the meaning crisis. In terms of my particular project, in the context of sense-making, what we really need, I think, is to reclaim how to tell what's good. With practices and understandings that heighten our sense of what is good, we can gradually come out of this extremely chaotic time, not just because of coronavirus, but because of many situations we find ourselves in that we cannot make sense of things. And perhaps with these practices and understandings, we can come out of this with some clarity. There's a lot of crossover in this corner in terms of practices to connect to what's real and what's good. Much of the work I've seen on sense-making on the Rebel Wisdom channel and other places seem to be a combination of analytical and psychological tools. And what's coming out of this is sort of an idea that the right brain is the master. And this follows the paradigm of rational ensconced in value. Value needs to be the whole, the gestalt, and rational can be using parts of this gestalt or extracting parts pragmatically to help us implement the value, the good, the quality. Of course, I'm going to be exploring quality as to how it relates to sense-making, which of course I think can be the basis for sense-making. In fact, I'm a little biased, but I think quality is the basis for any sense that has ever been made. Everyone on this corner of the internet is driven by a desire to make sense, and this, of course, is a very high-quality endeavor. Paul Vanderklay is putting out a video, he may have already put it out, I'm not sure, on how the center of the intellectual dark web, the IDW, is beginning to constellate around the man who named it, Eric Weinstein, and I think this is true. And there is a distinct link with Weinstein and the Futurists on Rebel Wisdom. The Futurists have come on to speak about the future and how we can implement a way of understanding that'll keep us alive and thriving. And there's, of course, this California genius connection with Weinstein. My favorite futurist is Daniel Schmachtenberger. He makes the most sense to me. He speaks the most clearly. I love listening to all the futurists on the Rebel Wisdom channel and in this corner and in other places, but there seems to be a sort of lingo they use, which is a mixture of scientific, computer science, economic terms and gaming terms, and California slang. And that, I think, is keeping people at a distance to some degree. I went to a Rebel Wisdom meetup a few months ago in my town, and that was a common critique. People were saying, you know, we really like what these guys are saying, we can really use it, but you have to sift through the lingo. And the lingo, I think, that they use is probably their best way of expressing their quality, their perception of quality, using what's in their boxcars. And this is definitely in the intellectual level, and it is on a social level to a kind of limited degree because it keeps them sort of inside their own social barrier. There's a certain degree of that cultural immune system at work here. And I would say even Eric Weinstein suffered from this to a certain degree when he became in the public view. But he's really fixed it. He's really become much more clear in how he speaks, and he uses less of these economic and mathematical terms and more common English. And I think this is a huge element, I think, to why his viewership and influence is growing. It's growing rapidly. He was always good, but now we can tell how good he is. And I hope that some of these futurists take on this method of speaking in a little bit more clear terms, because they have so much good to say. A long time back, I began to realize that our spiritual intelligence lagged far behind our technological progress. And I realized that our sense-making was being hijacked, as well as our peace of mind, by the production of this machine of digital information, of infinite shiny objects. Therefore, I'm intrigued by this group of thinkers who see the need for personal transformation as a prerequisite for sense-making. In the Rebel Wisdom film, The War on Sense-Making, Schmachtenberger said our relationship with technology is like running through the woods, increasingly fast and increasingly blind. That is perfect. Eric Weinstein had him on his podcast recently and introduced him as someone who's trying to articulate and implement a new way of understanding, a game B based on wisdom, as opposed to game A, which is based on rivalry. And there's a certain degree of Ken Wilber in there, which I really appreciate. So after becoming involved in personal spiritual work, I became convinced that mankind needed spiritual transformation in order to handle the technology that is truly beginning to resemble the science fiction of my youth. But it was difficult for me to articulate just how this could happen, and in my spiritual quest for answers to this, I found a number of gurus: Alan Watts, Ken Wilber, Jordan Peterson, and finally, Robert Pirsig. Now, how can good quality detection and implementation result in good sense-making? Much of what makes sense according to Pirsig's philosophy involves identifying and acting on what is good. In fact, that is probably the driving force of Pirsig's philosophy. I mention frequently what gets in the way of implementing quality are traps. Let's say the pre-intellectual awareness of quality is pure. It is absolutely spontaneous. When we are perceiving and then manifesting that quality, we are filled with a psychic gasoline called gumption, which is very much like the flow state. At least that's the optimal situation you want to be in. So let me read from, again, Gumption Chautauqua, which I mention so frequently. The word gumption describes exactly what happens to someone who connects with quality. He gets filled with gumption. The Greeks call it enthusiasmos, the root of enthusiasm, which means literally filled with theos, or God, or quality. See how that fits? A person filled with gumption doesn't sit around dissipating and stewing about things. He is at the front end of the train of his own awareness, watching to see what's up the track and meeting it when it comes. That's gumption. That is to say, complaining doesn't do much, action does. But the problem with action is we can get into negative traps that frustrate or floor us. And we can get involved in dead-end traps based on the misperception of that quality stimulus, which is very much like Vervaeke's description of the machinery being hijacked by self-deception, parasitic processing. I think I'm going to expand on this in the near future, because there are ways to implement quality in the information age, to implement this dynamic. So an update of the advice in the Gumption Chautauqua, chapter 26, in case I haven't highlighted that frequently enough. There's a way we can update this advice for the information age, and this is a project I'm interested in, thinking a lot about, and intend to pursue. So there is theory and there's practice in this whole endeavor, and both are necessary. We need to have an idea of where we stand and how to use what's in our boxcars, but we also need ways of growing our own wisdom. Both are relevant to the project of addressing the meaning crisis and our future. There are also two other approaches, the personal and the collective, and I am in the camp of the personal transformation because I don't have the background or the IQ that the futurists have. Both Jordan Peterson and Pirsig, despite indicating personal transformation was the key to collective transformation, had ways of helping grow collective wisdom. And there are certain people out there who have done their own work and who are visionary enough to help infuse our collective system with wisdom and even reorient them. My own spiritual and intellectual quest has yielded improvement on myself, although this is obviously and will always be a work in progress. In doing so, I think I've become a pretty good therapist. I've worked hard at it and I care. So personal transformation is my quality path. and I hope to share my tips for personal transformation with others, and I'm certainly getting this in return from this project. Also, I'm trying to share more on social media and have started to update my website to include transcripts of my videos. I've been on Twitter as well, but Twitter is less productive so far, as the dialogue I'm engaged with in the comments section on my YouTube videos, which has really been fruitful. So I'll put links to these below, links to my website and to my Twitter account. I've also started a Patreon account, hopefully to give me more time to produce content and to keep me more accountable and on track, on my own quality track with this channel. So please share your stories with me as to how Pirsig has helped your own transformation and your own understanding of reality. So I hope that made sense, and I will see you next time.